Hi, this is Popo. I hope you're fine. Welcome back to the Matches New Era tournament, round 1. And today we're going to review the two games played between Pouace and e3Gewinnt. So let's get started. Okay, so for this first game, Pouace plays with the white pieces with the Aliens faction, and e3Gewinnt gets the black pieces with the Dragons faction. So I'll talk a little about the factions. For the Alien faction, this is a faction that allows you to play several of your pieces on one turn. So this means that sometimes you can get 2 times faster than your opponent. It leads to very early development and insane tactical skills. Somehow you feel that you can sacrifice some pieces, but at the same point, because you move another piece, you get some tempo, and then you can get some awful attacks. So if you are a great tactician, Aliens is definitely something you should consider. On the other hand, the Dragons faction is a faction that allows you every time one of your pieces die to get some compensation in terms of piece power or in terms of material advantage. This means that if you play the most drawish way, the dragons, you would still be up some material or have stronger pieces somehow. So this faction is pretty hard to play against, because the dragons at the end of the day would be better normally in the end game. So let's see how it goes. The game starts with pawn to e4, we have pawn to e6, we have pawn to d4 and to d5 in the French defense, and we have the exchange variation which is played on the board. We have now the Mech going to d2, then the Mech going to d3. So here this is a typical alien move. When the Mech, which is the bishop type unit, moves exactly 1 square for more of capture, you can play the second Mech passively up to 3 squares. So it allows you to play the 2 mechs on the same turn, which is very powerful. So Pouace gets ahead in terms of development. We have Dxrake to f6, and this very ill move which is Saucer to f3. So this move is a very tricky move. Let me show you why. If you decide, for example, to play Wyvern to e7, which looks like a normal move, then I can decide to take the Dxrake with the Saucer, and the Saucer has an ability. If technically I take a piece, not a pawn, a piece, I would be able to move passively one of my piece during the same turn. So I can decide to move my Mech here and give check to the king. So it has to defend, let's say. And here you already lost a piece, so that would be just an exchange. But here in this position you can even take here and try to capture the egg, so it has to go back. And once the egg got this here, then you can decide just to go back, and then you just want a piece, and the position of black has worsened considerably. So here in this position you have to be very careful. So e3Gewinnt decided to play Wyvern to d7, which is actually a very cool move. You would be thinking that Dxrake here and head here are good moves, yeah. But here, this is a little better move. Why? Because this Wyvern later on the game can decide to go here. I'll just remind you that this Wyvern is range 3, so it can't immediately go here. So by putting this Wyvern here, it allows you later on to get the tempo of the Saucer. So that would be pretty interesting on the game. We have scoot to c3, head to d6, and scoot to e2 with a long castle. So here the scoot, when it moves on the sides, it allows the king to perform a passive move during this turn. So here the move performed is just allowing you to castle. And you see that you already have a lot of pieces involved in the attack, and you don't have a lot of things developed for the dragon side. So seems like that Pouace has the advantage, positionally speaking. But you have Wyvern to g4, which is played. And here, this is a kind of punishment. You see, early in the game, one move that would have to be played, for example, in this position here, this is okay, still okay, but once this is played here, you have to be very careful, because if this Wyvern goes here, it leads to very big attacks. So one move to be played here, it would be h3. But because this move hasn't been played, white is going to run into trouble, because after Wyvern to g4 and Saucer to g3, the head is a special pawn that can move 2 squares per turn, like a torpedo pawn. So we have egg to c4, and the mech is trapped. Maybe you wonder if we could have a capture here and then try to get something like, I don't know, you capture here and you put the mech here. Seems like it would work, but unfortunately the Wyvern is a piece that if you capture this exactly 1 square away, your piece would vanish. So you're done a queen, technically. So here, because of this, Saucer to g3 is pretty much forced, so after egg to c4, then they are screwed, basically. But don't worry, Pouace always have a lot of ideas, so he starts first with Saucer to e5 check, and after Wyvern to e7, he decides to take here the head on c4, and then move the other mech to g5, so still have some positional compensation. You see that upon taking the head here, a new head just appeared. This is one of the ability of the Hydra. If 2 heads are captured, so remember there were 3 heads at the beginning of the game, so if 2 heads gets captured, a 3rd head is just created in front of the Hydra when the square is available. This is a recurring thematic of the dragons, because sometimes you have just a piece in front of the Hydra, so the square is not free, and at this time the Hydra would just have to move, and when it moves and the square is available, then the head creates itself. So it's very cool for big tactics here. But because of this move, this tactic is not available for now, and you see that the head is created is not in the right square here. So it seems like there's a little compensation from the alien side. But we have to say that the dragons are up 3 points of material, and for a faction that gets up material very quickly, that's already some kind of good advantage. So Pouace has to be now very quick in the attack. So we have pawn to f3 kicking the Wyvern to f5, and then we have pawn to g4 kicking the Wyvern normally to a g6. But we have this little intermezzo here with the Dxrake to c6, which forces the Saucer to leave, and the Saucer decides to go to e3, which is a pretty cool square, I have to say. Wyvern to g6 is played, and now we have pawn to d5, kicking the Dxrake. The Dxrake goes to b4, and now in the game, scoop to d4 is played. But there is slightly better move, which has been found by one of the members of the Discord server. It is Tripot to d4. Tripot to d4 comes with a lot of traps. First, if you just want to ignore this and, for example, play this, then there's this awful move pawn to d6. And then the Wyvern is forced to go back, and then you can put the Saucer on e5. And with the Saucer on e5, you see that you have to block with 1 piece. So for example, you decide to block with the Wyvern, let's say. Then you can just decide to take here, and this is still check. So you basically won a piece. So this is very cool. Also, if you go on the same line, and you decide to defend instead with another piece, so let's say after this and this, you decide to defend, for example, with this, then you just have to capture here with check, and you move the tripod 1 square away. So this is check. The Wyvern has to capture, and then you just can capture with the tripod, and with this you're able to push a pawn. So you just have to push this pawn, and after the check is consumed, you, let's say, go here, then you can take the Dxrake, and you are 3 points of material up. So the tactics are just incredibly insane. But after tripod to d4, actually black can decide to play Wyvern to c5, which is a pretty cool move. And here you have to be very, very precise in your attack, because after Saucer to c5, e5, you know that you can't block the check. So you have to put the king to f8. And after we have, for example, tripod takes a c4, and then technically it's better to push the h4 pawn here. You see that the Wyvern is threatened, so the Wyvern can go back to d6 and it gets a tempo over the Saucer, and you don't have any trick to do so. The Saucer has to get back. So for example, let's say the Saucer goes to e3, then you have to be careful with the Dxrake, also careful with the Wyvern, because something is going to happen here. So the position is very, very interesting here. So anyways, in this kind of position, we have scoot to d4, which is played, so I guess preparing the attack, maybe it wants to go on this square, and now black decides to castle kingside. So with 3 points down of material, Pouace is now leading the attack and trying to get something before the game gets drawish. So pawn to h4 is played, menacing the Wyvern here on g6. So a pawn to h6 is played, and here Pouace decided to play some kind of move, which is scoot to f5 followed by king stay here. So here, Pouace doesn't care of his mech to be captured, because if captures, then it gets recaptured, and you see that the wall fire is available for the tripod, and it would open the king. So Pouace decided to, I don't know, sacrifice a lot of material here, and this is accepted by e3Gewinnt, and after pawn captures and pawn recaptures, we have Dxrake to h7, which is played. So now we have scoot to e4 with king stays on c1, so you see that all the pieces are mobilized into the attack. This is very incredible to see. You're down 5 points on material, but somehow you have the activity here. But e3Gewinnt wants to simplify, of course, so we have Wyvern takes f5, pawn takes f5. Even I think that letting the Wyvern be on this square would be quite interesting. Even this seems very scary, but okay, this also can be played. We have now head to c3, and now this is very interesting. If you decide to capture here with Dxrake, then you have to be careful, because this can happen. But at the same point, this is not a big threat at all, because if captures, then you can decide to capture here, and once this is recaptured, then you can get the Dxrake. But the only problem here, and you perfectly saw the line, is that you capture, then there's a simple capture here, and you lost your Sosa. So you have to calculate all the lines to be sure not to mess anything. So you can't capture this with the Sosa. So this is maybe better to capture with the pawn. The only problem is that your king would be very exposed here. So this is ignored, and tripod to h5 is played. But now we have takes b2 check. And here, if I were white, I would just play the king to b1 and use this head as a shield pawn. I mean, the other pieces are pretty far away, and these are very slow pieces with range 3, so it would take a little some time to get through this. Also, please remind that you don't have any light square Wyvern on the dragon side, so normally you would be able to survive this. But here in the game, king takes b2 and goes on dark square, which is pretty dangerous, I have to say. And now Hydra to a5 is played, and yeah, there's already some kind of threat here. Maybe you are afraid of this move, and after this the Hydra goes here, but you can just play the Saucer here and try to go for a queen trade. So yeah, I wasn't worried for this. So after king takes and Hydra to a5, you have the pawn to a3. Pawn to a3 is mandatory, because here the threat is to capture here. Now once king decides to go here, you capture, and this is checkmate. So one move that you can play also to try to avoid any future problem is to play the tripod here to a1. But yeah, it seems pretty complicated here. So pawn to a3 is played, but I think for me this is not a good move, because actually black can decide to capture on a3 with check, and after king recaptures, you just have to take on c2 with the Dxrake, and once let's say the king goes to b2, then you capture the Saucer, and you have an attack on the tripod. So let's say you decide to move the tripod here to get the alignment. Now this is the turn of the dragons, and normally they have enough pieces to do something. They are up 8 points of material, of course they don't have all the activity of the world, and they have to be very careful, but normally they can deal with such position. But instead in the game we have pawn to g6, which is played. Why pawn to g6? Because let's say you decide to play the egg to c8, then the tripod can decide to take the Dxrake and then push the pawn, and then they just take one piece for free. So let's say you decide to capture here, you just have to get back with the tripod, and then you're secure. So yeah, you have to be aware of this tactic. So here pawn to g6 is played, but Pouace decides to sacrifice again some material here with tripod takes h7, and now the pawn is pushed on d6, so getting rid of the Wyvern here. So we have king captures h7, and now the pawn captures on e7, and as this is one square away, it vanishes. And you see that with this simplification, you don't have a lot of defense here for your king, and this move is pretty scary, because you would have the ability to slide this and try to get the Saucer here, or even the Saucer here. Like, this gets very scary. And again, you have to see this move and get the simplification, else you're going to get a very bad time. At the same time, because one of the Drake is gone, I just have to notice you that this Drake now gets stronger because it lost his twin brother. And now he will be able to passively jump up to 2 squares diagonally. So that's a pretty cool ability. So now the range of the Drake is some kind of, I don't know, border stuff with, you see this little, I don't know, as to say, corner. So we have Drake takes c2 now. I think it wants to sacrifice material, but I'm not really convinced of this move here. I think the only thing that gets you on the game is to just have some material here, or maybe it was really afraid of some kind of tactic here, so I don't know, maybe. So a Drake takes c2 here, we have king to c2, and now the Hydra takes a3. So maybe this is preparing some kind of repetition here for a draw, but unfortunately the sorcerer is so well placed that normally it would cover the square once the king decides to get here. So here in the game we have Tripot to h1, so the threat is just going on. And now we have Hydra to a2 check, king to d1, Hydra to b1 check, king to e2, Hydra to c2 check, and after king to f1, we have Hydra to c4. I mean, you could have tried here to go for check, the only problem is that after king to g2, then you're out of check also. So, I mean, Hydra to c4 makes perfectly sense because you want to get the Hydra on the defense. So after king to g2, you have king to g7, be sure to not get any check here. And I guess the project now is to try to slide the egg and try to run the king away, even if this looks very scary. But here, Sosa goes to f4, and now there's a threat here of check, and then a checkmate later on. Of course, it buys one move, but that would be unstoppable here. So we have Hydra to e6 straight to protect the square, but now the tripod goes on h4, and the threats are coming. I mean, now the next move that threats something is to put the scout here. But now we have egg to c8, so trying to escape the king away, and yeah, this is pretty hard to get some progress here. We have scout to f6, which is played, and now king to f8 is played. So here actually I was doing this move, and I was trying to think is was a mate here, because it looks tempting after tripod to h8 check, then you have king to e7, and then you can put the scout to g8, and you see that the king can't escape. So it has, for example, to go back, let's say, to this square. And then by getting some discovered check, now it can get very interesting. The only problem is that you don't have any good square to reroll here. So for example, let's say that you decide to put the scout on f6 here with check. Here the king would decide to go here, but you see that because this egg here, you can't slide the tripod here, so that's very sad. So maybe you go for a repetition, but that doesn't have a lot of sense to me. So I don't know, you can try to slide it this way, but after this, what's your main goal here? Because the king and this are controlling the way, and you don't want the king to escape. So this is why in this position that Sosa to d4 is tried. So I don't really know what has been tempted. Maybe he wants to put the king on suit song. I'm not that high rated to calculate all the implication of this, but we'll see how it goes. King to e7 is played, so here I guess maybe the big threat here is really common, and maybe there would be something helpful. I don't know, because now this square is not guarded here, and the king can try to escape and go here. I don't know. So a king to e7 is tried, so the king basically wants to escape, and I can understand this. We have scout to e5 with king to d2, which is played, and now this is check. So of course I don't want to get here. This seems way too scary. Even maybe this would be a way to try to get away. The only problem is that after this, for example, let's say king here, you just have to put the scout here to f4, and I don't know, move your king here. This is check, and you're basically going to win a piece here, and even if you try to get this, then you're dead. So yeah, I can understand why this is not playable. We have king to d8, and now this is very scary because everything is controlled there. So the tripod slides to h8 with check. There's only one move, Hydra to e8, and here there was mate in one, I guess, with the sorcerer here to f6, and everything's controlled, the Hydra can't move. But this has not been found by white. I mean, Pouace is so much winning here that he thought that everything was playable, I guess. So tripod takes e8 is played, and pawn to f4, so sacrificing straight up the tripod, why not, with king to takes e8. And now again, you can continue to play the game. I don't remember. Yeah, Saucer to F5 as E5 is played, King to E8, Saucer to E7 check, King to G7, Pawn to F5. Yeah, this is playable. One other stuff which could be playable here is Saucer to F6 check. The fact is that you have only two squares here. If you decide, for example, to go to this square, then there's just check here, and you're going to be checkmated very soon because you have only one square left. There's check here, you have to go here, and after this is mate. Okay? And your second option, if you decide, excuse me, go to G7, oh yeah. So after this, if you decide to go here, then you have the Saucer goes to F7 with check, then the king will be forced to go here, and then, I don't know, you can decide just to continue the checks, or you can just decide to put the scout to F6, and then the mate here is unstoppable, so technically you have one. But in the game, we have pawn to A5, which is a little slow, which is played. You have egg to C6 rank to defend the position, and now a pawn to F6 check and king to H8. Here we have Saucer to A7 check. Here I was a little surprised because you can have this very easy Saucer to F8 check. The range of the egg is only orthogonal 3, so after the king runs here, this is just mate. So again, I don't know, you have a lot of lines. So Saucer takes F7, and now the egg sacrifices itself. And this is cool because this allows me to showcase you one of the ability of the egg. If the egg gets to get captured, then it would hatch a baby whelp just on the square before. So here you see that just square before it launches the small baby. So it takes with scout to E7, this is check, and after king to H7, then Saucer takes F7 check with the king going to G3. And after king to H8, then you have scout to G6. Even, I don't know, there was checkmate here, basically, but okay, why not? Scout to J7, king to G4 is also checkmate. So this is on move 57 that Pouace won the game against e3Gewinnt. So it was a very interesting game, and I have to say that it was crazy to see all that material sacrificed by white to get the main activity. Of course, with the simplification I showed you with the Hydra capturing on a3, the game would be slightly different because now the dragons would have the advantage, and I don't guess the aliens will be able to get any compensation with this, but this was still very interesting to watch. So I hope you like this game. We're going to see now the second game of this encounter just right now. Okay, so for the second game, now e3Gewinnt gets the white pieces with the Vampires faction, and Pouace gets the black pieces with the Angels faction. So the Vampire faction is a faction that allows you to make sacrificial strikes. Here you see that you have little ghouls here. You can capture your own ghouls, so it allows you, for example, to practical skills like early development or king escape, but also certain pieces can just sacrifice the ghouls just to make powerful jumps. Like imagine in the anime you have the main character which does a very long run, jumps in the head of the ally, and then goes for a second jump in the air and make a powerful blast. This is the kind of idea you're going to go with the vampires. So technically the more ghouls you have and the better they're placed, the more powerful you will get. But if almost all of your ghouls get traded, then you're going to be very weak at the end of the day. For the Angels, this is a faction that allows your unit in some condition to be invincible and can be captured. So for defense, this is a very cool faction, but at the same time, if you're very methodical and positional, you can have some devastating attacks. Sometimes very slow, sometimes very quick. But yeah, you can be very surprised with the Angels, because when you get attacked by a piece that you can't capture, this is pretty hard. So we're going to see how the game is played. The game starts with ghoul to d4, we have pawn to f6, ghoul to c4, pawn to g6, wolf to f3, zealot to g7, ghoul to e4, and short castle, which is the king's Indian defense. So very interesting. You see that there's little shields here on these two pieces. This is thanks to the gate, which is the rook type units by 4. Any piece which are on the two front squares of the gate are protected and can't be captured. So this position is pretty solid as a defense for the Angels. we have wolf to f3, pawn to d6, and now I have to explain little the ability of the wolf. You see, this wolf is a knight type unit, but if he captures a ghoul, it can perform a second jump and capture another piece. It works only if it can capture a piece, because you see that once it jumped one time, you see that there's no piece to capture here, so it would just capture the piece without stuff. So this is not like the Alliance where it gets a second turn. Here, this is just like you jump and re-jump in one turn. Okay, so you have to be very careful here. So we have Banshee to e2, which is played, preparing to castle, and now we have pawn to e5, which is a very interesting move. One stuff that you can play here is just to play here, but the only problem is that you don't have anything very cool for the wolf here, so this can be explained by that. Also, I guess that black wants to trade this pawn because the wolf would get slightly worse, but we have Banshee to e3 here, and I don't know why black didn't want to exchange. I mean, you can play here, and after, for example, let's say the Banshee retakes, then you can just play pawn to c5, and then you have the control over this square, and after the throne gets here, normally they would never get this diagonal, and you see that the Banshee wouldn't be placed at the right time. So maybe also after capture, maybe the wolf can recapture, but you see you have to do a lot of shuffle to get this thing back. So let's say here, and the wolf decides to go back, then it takes time to shuffle the Banshee and get the diagonal again. So yeah, why not? So after this we have a throne to c6, and I have to talk a little about the ability of the Banshee. See, this Banshee can also capture a ghoul, but if he captures a ghoul, it can slide one square away orthogonal to capture another piece in the same way the wolf would be forced to capture. So that's pretty interesting to play. So two pieces that can sacrifice ghoul to make powerful attack moves. So we have castle, and now a throne goes back to d7. I guess the aim here is to push. Maybe some of you were considering some move like a zealot to g4, but this is a blunder because the wolf can just stay here and recapture back, and once the throne captures, you see that you're done some materials here. So just be sure that you never blundered this. So a throne to d7 is played, and now we have Banshee to g5, so taking advantage of this. And now you see that the shield is threatened by the Banshee. So here you can decide to play pawn to f6 in normal chess, but because this is the angels can just simply play zealot to f6, and thanks to the gate it cannot be captured. So that's cool for that. I guess what could be played here is just to get the throne back. Even this is not tempting, because after the zealot goes to f6, then the Banshee goes to h6, and now the gate is threatened. I mean, what could be interesting is to put the zealot on g7, and just to get for a trade and the game continues. But here we have gate to e8, so the advantage of going this invincible is just gone. And now you see that the vampire would take advantage of this, because we now have ghoul to d5, so straight up attacking the throne, so the throne decides to go to d4. But we have capture, capture, and then recaptures with the Banshee. So you see that what's pretty interesting here is that the vampires use this to slide the diagonals of the Banshee, and now both Banshees are on dark squares. And you see that the king is pretty weak here on dark squares. So now we have a throne to e5 trying to protect, but for me I'm not sure that this is a very cool move. Because now we have ghoul to h3. Okay, ghoul to h3, I can understand the stuff this is going here. But I was thinking here of move. Is wolf captures on e4, then captures here with check. This is a fork, so now the shield has to capture that. And then you can play maybe ghoul to f4, and now you see that the throne is pinned, so you have to find something. And yeah, this is hard. So to just survive this, you have to play the gate to e7, so now the throne would become invincible. And you don't have to think that this is the winning move, because here you straight up losing. Why? Because of the shield. The shield can't capture pawns, but also can't be captured by pawns. So this is a free piece, the pawn can't capture this. So here on the line, let me show you again, after this and this and this and this and this, playing here is not the winning move, but rather putting the tomb here and capture on f4. So here, for me, that would be straight up winning. You see, now by capturing a ghoul, the tomb triggers its ability and now it can leap move for every move it performs. So, very strong. So here, as this is attacks, the shield would rather have to go to the e6. Now you can, for example, play the Banshee to g5, so the gate is threatened and it has to move again. Get to e8, and then maybe you can play the tomb to f6 here. And now you see the shield is again threatened, and don't you go here, else you're going to get taken. Oh no, this is not get taken because the gate is just here to defend. So yeah, you can perfectly go here, and then the game would continue. And this is pretty hard to play for the Angel faction because now maybe the Count would just join the party and you have a lot of fun here. So this was a line that I would consider here. But in the game, you have ghoul to h2, which is played and makes perfect sense because you want to restrict the throne the more possible. And now we have throne to d7, which is played. And okay, I can understand the move, but it feels a little weak for me. Because first it cuts the diagonal of the zealot if can't do something, but you'll see that this one is not that defending. Now we have Banshee captures f6, now the throne recaptures, and now the count goes to d4. And you see now that this throne is pinned for checkmate, and now there is one attacker and two attacker against the throne. And you can't even get the gate here to defend, else it would be just straight up taken. So technically, the throne has to escape. So it decides to go to h5, so try to control this square. The only problem is that now you have ghoul to g4, and you just have to give up the throne, and the game is just crashing. So we have pawn to f6, which is played, and now after ghoul takes g5, h5, excuse me, you can't even take back, because now the wolf would enter with this, and the position would be a nightmare to play. So here we have king to f7, trying to add a defender to the square, but now you have pawn takes f2, and now this is jumping. There's a threat to go here and jump, and there's nothing you can really do against that. You can try to play this move, I mean, but there are too much threats here. So here in the game, gate to e5 is tried, but pawn to f4 is played, check, king to g8, wolf takes d5, then f6 check is played. Now the shield is forced to take, else you're just going to get screwed. For example, after king goes here, then you just have to slide this, and bye, you can just resign the game on the spot here. And even you can try to defend, let's say you try to defend with, I don't know, you would just straight up lose this bit, but even more, you would just get here and this is mate. So after the shield takes and the tomb recaptures, we have zealot to d7, which is tried to get this, but this is not sufficient because there is no way for you to defend against the tomb to f8. I mean, maybe you would try to get the gate back here, but then you just have this check here, and once this is captured, this is mate here. So even if you try to escape with the king, the count goes to g7, and this is mate. And this is why this is on move 25 that e3Gewinnt won the game with the vampires with a very cool attack. So this was a very interesting game. I think that the Angels didn't get enough of development. Maybe they were too defensive, and they got very tricked. Especially this recurring theme of the throne going up and down here, that didn't help a lot. I don't know. This is always interesting stuff to do. So I hope you like this game and the two games, especially between these two candidates. We're going to see each other next time for another encounter between two of the candidates for this round 1 of the Matches New Era tournament. So see you then. Bye.